there. I'm your host, Leslie Randolph. I'm a self-confidence coach for teenage girls and the self-confidence coach you wish you had as a teen. Honestly, I'm the self-confidence coach I wish I had as a teen because I know I could have saved myself and my mother a whole lot of heartache if I'd only known then what I know now. I hope to save you some of that suffering by sharing the lessons I learned late in life right here on Why Didn't They Tell Us? Welcome to the show. Hey, happy people. Welcome back to Why Didn't They Tell Us? I got to tell you something. I'm so excited for today's show. And not just because I know it will be a gift for you, but it's going to be a gift for me too. Because today's topic is one that I've thought about and talked about, and let's be honest, like stressed about for a long time. And it's when we let our kids quit, when we let them tap out or just totally give up. So let me set the scene. I'll tell you why. We've talked about this, thought about it, stressed about it for years. I was one of those moms that said, my kids don't quit. If there was like a family mantra, that was one of them. My kids don't quit. We're not quitters. It was the hill I was willing to die on until I let one of my kids quit. It's like before you have kids and you vow they'll never eat McDonald's. They're never going to watch a screen. They're never going to drink juice. These are some of the other hills that I was willing to die on until I wasn't. I actually probably have a photo of one of my kids. I can see my son just like watching an iPad while eating fast food and chugging some apple juice. And you know why I ultimately did it? Why I went back on this belief that I held so firmly? Because it was the kindest and most compassionate thing I could do for me. Yeah, it wasn't even about him. It was about me. That photo of my kid living his best life with a burger in one hand and a screen in the other, it was likely in one of those moments when I was just in preservation mode and needed someone else to do the cooking and the entertaining. Now, I tell this story because I think the same thing is true when I let my other kid quit dance. I think I was so tired, exhausted from the fighting and the weekly power struggle of her crying, I don't want to go, that I actually tapped out again for my own preservation. And I think about this a lot. Was it the right choice for her? Was it the right choice in the long run, right? What message did it send her? So to help me answer these questions, because obviously I've been in my head about it way too much or on walks with fellow moms or calls with fellow moms, I called in reinforcements. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Emily Gordon. Dr. Emily Gordon is a licensed clinical psychologist with a private practice in Massachusetts, where she specializes in treating adolescents and young adults, as well as women of all ages. Dr. Gordon is a seasoned speaker and expert on eating disorders and body image, adolescent development, young adulting, and parenting. Recognizing both the importance and fragility of the adolescent years, Dr. Emily helps empowers parents to connect with and positively influence their teens. Dr. Emily, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Leslie. I'm so excited to be here and to talk about this really, really hard and important topic. And I thank you for finding me and inviting me, and also for sort of sharing your story and your details, because that I think will really help us to dig in.
Well, thank you. And thank you for acknowledging that it's hard, because it's felt hard. And there's been a lot of like back and forth in my mind. And so I'm so thrilled that you're here to help me, walk away from this, give more real estate in my brain to other topics, because we can now just, check the box on this one. So I'm going to kick it off with the $1 million question, right?
Okay, I'm ready.
When do we let our kids quit?
When do we let our kids quit? Yeah, it's a really hard one, right? And I think the reason why it's so hard is that we put so much pressure on ourselves, as you were saying in your introduction, to make like the right decision. And we feel that it like our decision matters so much, both for ourselves and our kids. I also want to kindly point out, I hope we can work with your example here.
I can take it.
I think we need to change the words that we use, because I think when we say, do I let my kid quit? Right. So quitting has a negative connotation. And so, so it feels like we're just sort of setting it up and teeing up the conversation into this, like we're either winning or losing, like we're like quitting, or we're like, as you say, sort of like, this is the hill I'm dying on. And I think it also sort of, it pushes us into this all or nothing, like it's like, we have to stick with it or we have to quit, and that there's no room for some sort of other solution or compromise, which really misses out on just a lot of other possibility.
100%. And thank you. Yes, it has like, it's just ick. It just feels icky. Like I let myself down because I went against this, like belief I had.
Yes.
Totally the word. I mean, this is where language matters so much. The word quitting, it does. It has this negative connotation. I don't think of any context where that has a positive one. And yeah, I just felt like I'd failed in some way because she quit. So we need to change the word. We need a new vocabulary word, Dr. Emily. Tell me what we're doing.
So what would the alternative be? I mean, I think that like the alternative is just to step back and say, like, this is a decision that we have to make. Are we going to continue or not continue? Are we going to stay on this road or are we going to take a turn? Right. And I think this is going to be the framework for our entire conversation, is that there is no right way, right turn. Sometimes we can't know the road ahead of time, right? We can't predict those bumps or the twists and turns. But if we've thought about why we're doing what we're doing, or why we're not going to do what why we're going to do something different, that's what counts. So I think, like, again, when we say, do I quit or do I not quit? That kind of locks us in, but instead we want to step back and think about, what am I trying to accomplish here? What are the goals? What is the situation that I'm even in? Why am I even thinking about, like, in order to get to that point, to that question, there must have been something going on for your kid, for you, for your family, whether that was like, tears or finances or time in the car or just whatever it was that was sort of bringing up that question for you. We want to look at it and say, okay, like, what is going on, and what problem am I trying to solve?
Okay, that's already just such a gift that you have given me. And I hope anyone tuning in can feel that, how much lighter it feels to say, like, I'm taking this detour. Oh, I'm just changing paths. And I think, obviously we're talking about this through the lens of this one example. And I know so many moms that can feel this of like, when do I take that turn? But I think we can think about it for ourselves too, of when do we say, like, I need to take a different turn in my life. Right. And if you go back to my story, it really was, I needed to take a different turn because there was such resistance. And that's the word that I'll use every week. And every week it was this like clash between us that wasn't good for our relationship. And it, like, no one was winning, right? Because once you drop off a kid who's like hysterically crying, I'm sure the dance teachers were pretty happy that I took my detour, because she couldn't have been fun to be with her.
Right.
So I thank you for that. So when we make our detour, like, what should we keep in mind when we make the decision to change paths? And well, I'll start there because I've got an add-on question there.
Okay. So that's really important. What are we considering when we are making this decision? And so the first thing we want to look at is, like, is this, and we could just use your example, right? Is the dance activity, is sticking with it, like, is that helping or hurting? And maybe the follow-up to that would be, in what ways is it helping or hurting?
Yeah, I mean, so I'm going back to the top of the call when you were like, we put such pressure on ourselves. From where I sit today. And right. And I'm not in it anymore. And if you're in it, I think that it's really challenging. I recognize, like, Was she going to Joffrey or going to be like a Rocket? Probably not, right?
Mm-hmm.
But in my head, it was like, it wasn't even about like her future dance career. It was about this message that I was sending.
Well, so that's the next question, right? Is sort of, what is this about?
Mm-hmm.
Because I think, again, when we get locked into this, like, should I quit or should I not quit? That consumes all of our energy and our focus, right? And again, we want to take a step back and say, like, what is going on? What is this about? And then the next question to that is this about me or is this about my kid, right? Is this something that, like, is hard for me to let go of for any of my own reasons? Is this something that I feel strongly about because it was important to me or because it's important to our family? Or like, how is this help? Like, what is this about for my kid? And then I think we have to ask, like, what is actually the goal? And once we can identify what the goal is, then we can think about, okay, like, is this actually pointing us on the road, like in that direction? Or could we be better served could we still reach the goal, but in a different way?
I don't know if you guys can see me. If you're on YouTube, you can see me. I hope the majority of you listen versus see, which is very good because I feel very called out right now. But 100%, I can see that this was about this belief that I held, right? Of what it meant. And I'm going to go back to our original language of what it meant to quit, right? And that had nothing to do with her. If I was able to look at her, from her perspective, it just,
yeah. And I don't mean to put you on the spot. It's just such a good example, right? Because
I welcome it.
So it gets into, like, what does it mean to you to quit? But it also gets back to that first part of the conversation about the pressures that we feel as parents, because I think it also speaks to, like, what does it mean to you as a parent, right? Like, if I quit, what does that mean for the kind of parent I am? And of course, there's always a lot of fear. I think, like, when we are making these decisions, there's so much fear. Like you also spoke to this of, like, what if I make the wrong decision, right? Or what if I'm screwing up my kid, forever? Or what if she misses out on something? And it's so hard in these moments. And I'm also a parent. I've been there myself in my own family. I also see it in my practice that sometimes these pivots actually provide, like we're so afraid of what quitting dance will mean that we lose sight of all of the actual possibilities that stopping dance and redirecting our resources elsewhere could allow. And I have so many examples of this, again, from my practice, from my own kids' lives. But it's so hard in the moment because we just can get ourselves so, like, dug in.
100%, 100%. I love the imagery that you've now given me of when I was able to make that detour and go down that road. I mean, I couldn't think of, like, the possibility that would come from it.
No.
And now I can, right now that I've gone down that road, I can see, like, what it opened up for her. She found some other areas that she loves, some other activities where she shines, and there's no push pull or power struggle because she's exactly where she's meant to be. In that moment when there was all that pressure and, the holding on to, it's, and I like I said, I welcome you to use me as an example. I tee it up for you that, what it meant for me as a parent.
Yeah.
If I let my kid, and I'm air quoting now, quit.
Yeah.
But I think, I offered it as my preservation, but this is not unique to my daughter. It's not unique to dance. There is that resistance. And I wonder how we can, because if it's just that you don't like it, like, well, that's maybe not a reason, or it is, right?
how do we help adolescents identify what's going on for them? Like, are there specific questions that we could ask them to understand, why there is that pushback?
Yeah. Well, that's the most important part here, right? Is that because I think what we're talking about is, and maybe we'll get to this too, is like, when do we make decisions for our kids? And when do we empower them and involve them and sort of allow them to make decisions for themselves? And so your question kind of speaks to, how do we understand what's going on so that we can make, in air quotes, the best decision in the moment? And how do we help them to think through and prepare them, because ultimately they're going to make lots of decisions in their lives. And we kind of want to give them a framework for that. So, so one thing that I always say is that the kinds of questions that you might ask depend on the age of your kid, depend a little bit, maybe on the gender, but like kind of just on your kids' emotional development and where they are and how they process things. And all kids are different. So I'm going to give you some examples and you can, tweak it. So one thing that I like to ask is like, is this about the activity itself? Or is this about something else about the activity? For example, at one point, one of my kids did Taekwondo, and the uniform was a really big stumbling block. Because it was stiff and it wasn't comfortable. And so, like, it wasn't necessarily the activity, right? Like maybe the actual participating in the activity was fine, but it was something sensory going on, around some aspect of the activity? Or is it about the teacher or the instructor? Or is it about the other kids that are there, right? So that we have to understand kind of where the challenge is so that we can figure out, if the kid doesn't like the activity, then it probably doesn't really make that much sense to continue the activity, right? If it's boring or it's too hard or, but if they could wear something different or you could switch to a different class, maybe that's a compromise. So the first thing is it the activity itself or is it something around it? The second thing is it once you're there or is it leading up to? Because a lot of kids have anxiety about transitions, about going from one place to another, about the long car ride, and maybe once they get there, it's actually not as bad as they seem, but like you're just stuck in that moment, right, where you're trying to get out the door. Or maybe you need a little more time scheduled to allow yourselves to get out the door. Or maybe you need a checklist of all the things that they need in their bag before so again, is it something about the anxiety or the leading up to the activity, or is it once they get there? Another good question is like, how would you feel if you stopped? Is there something you'd like to do instead?
Yeah.
With kids, younger kids, I think good questions are on a scale of 1 to 10. Because sometimes it's like kids they don't have the language to really figure out how much this is bothering them. So sometimes if you give them a scale of 1 to 10, it helps them frame it a little bit better. And for kids that really have a hard time figuring out how they're feeling, you could ask like, where in your body are you feeling this? And then you could just get curious about what it feels like or kind of like what's going on or where and how they're feeling.
Oh, I love all of that. And yes, of course, to be able to identify the emotion, to be able to like just sit with that emotion and to maybe put names and sensations to it. Love all of that. I love the scale. I will say, so switching a little bit into confidence coach mode, I would assume then at that point, especially if it's, that kind of build up, that anxiety that we have about the idea of it versus the actual of it. It's like, okay, so this is really just a bridge that you and I need to figure out how to get across together.
Yep.
And what can we do to like talk to ourselves or take care of ourselves in those moments leading up to it? Because ultimately what you miss out on is the sport that you love,
Right.
the friends that you love doing it with,
Yeah.
right? Because I typically, like, anxiety is an invitation in my world to say, okay, so how can we learn to live with that anxiety? Because transitions and new faces and new experiences, that's life.
Yes.
So to learn how to be able to do that, that's a life skill.
That's totally a life skill. And I think, again, that refocuses us on what are we trying to accomplish here? Right? Because yes, maybe like, maybe our kids, we want them to dance, or, but are we really trying to get them to the Joffrey Ballet? Or, are we just trying to teach them to take care of their bodies and do something that's fun and have a stress relief and kind of figure out how to navigate these transitions, right? So if we can figure out what's the stuckness, or what's the block, then we empower them, exactly as you're saying, right? Because they're gonna have other situations. If we just avoid the going, that's not helping them in the long run to develop their skills and their coping. And that's ultimately what a lot of these activities and decisions are about. Is like building life skills and confidence.
100%. Now, you said, like, and I so appreciate the question of, when are we making that decision for them?
Yeah.
Versus when they get the power and the autonomy.
Yeah.
And from your professional opinion, is that age? Is that?
So it's a little bit of age. And of course, there's like our societal sort of, there's certain things, right? Like school, that like, we can't really let our kids decide that they're not going to go to school. So there are some non-negotiables. In our families, we have values, right? Whether that's religion, or whether that's creative pursuits, or whether that's, doing homework, or taking care of our bodies physically. So like, we have family values, cultural values that maybe influence our decisions. So I think there's some things that are kind of non-negotiable. But that being said, I'm sure you've been hearing, like, I think there's a lot of kids these days that are really struggling with school, and there's an increase in school refusal. And again, kids have to go to school, but they also have to go to school in places that feel safe and comfortable and validating. And so if a kid isn't able to go to school, we got to look at, again, I would ask all these same questions: what's going on, what's happening, and how could we make it better? So it's not this sort of all or nothing, like, you have to go to school. It's about, how do we help you go to school? How do we help make it a place? What would make it easier? So I think there's that. Again, I think that depends a little bit on the age as to when we're letting kids make their decisions and when we're not. But ultimately, I think, and this is where I have my lens of, like, I have older kids that have transitioned to college, and I work with a lot of kids that have transitioned to college. Like, as parents, our job is to prepare our children to be able to make decisions for themselves. And so we really want to empower them to do that. So when we come down and say, you must, I think that's really, it's not a helpful stance.
It becomes that power struggle.
It becomes a power struggle.
And particularly in those tween and teen years, that desire for autonomy and control is so strong. That it really could. It's not even them stepping back to think what they want to accomplish. No, it's really just, I want to win.
Sort of locked into that, and I think that it really misses the point, which is that when we stop to engage in a conversation like this with our kids, especially our tweens and teens, I am continually astounded and amazed at the wisdom. Like, I'm going to cry, like, in thinking about some conversations that I've had with kids, that, like, their creativity, their wisdom, their like it is amazing what they can come up with. And I think we want to embrace that and empower that in any way that we can. And we also want to give them the message that, like, back to your confidence coaching, like, their knowledge, their self-awareness is awesome and is meaningful. And like, we want to empower that. We don't want to be teaching them to ignore themselves.
Yeah. I always say the one of the strongest, it's like the smallest but most important muscle, so we really have to work it, is that self-trust when it comes to confidence.
Yeah.
Because, how do you know when it's anxiety on the microphone in your mind or doubt and fear, or like gut instinct?
Yeah.
And that takes time. I mean, I'm an adult, I'm a mother, and sometimes I'm like, is this my fear or is this my gut?
Yeah.
And I have to check in. But that's because I now have decades worth of experience of saying like, oh, this is what doubt feels like. This is what gut instinct feels like when I'm making a decision of like, do I stay or do I go?
Yeah. Well, I think that's so important. And also, so it reminds me of two things. I mean, one is that we really need to make space for that, like for that thinking and that self-awareness, which when we're locked into sort of like the sort of imperativeness of making this all or nothing decision, I think we lose space for thinking about these things and just being curious. And it also reminds me of something you said at the beginning, like sometimes we're not going to know if it's the right, like sometimes we're not going to know if this is the right answer or the best decision in the moment, but we just have to have confidence that we're making a decision and this is the best we can do in the moment. That we are looking at the facts and the information and the circumstances that we are dealing with, and we are making the best decision that we can in this moment.
100%. I always like to tell myself there isn't a right decision.
Mm-hmm.
There's simply the right decision for me.
Right now.
And right now, we're adding to it.
Right now.
Right now, 100%. Because even, you talked about values. And I think I love going back to my personal values through the years because they shift depending on the season of life that I am in. Right. And so to be able to say, what do I value right now? And how can my actions and words align with that? And how can I make that, if it's a family value, my kids are a part of that.
Yeah. And that also, I don't know, as you're saying that, it also makes me think, we have to remember we're only human too. And you're right, that our values in the season of life, like it changes. And so do our own emotional and like resources, right? Or financial resources or time resources. Like sometimes we have the bandwidth to take on more and sometimes we don't as parents. And like, that's okay. And our kids are going to be okay. But we just have to be honest.
Yeah. And graceful with ourselves and with our children.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's a challenge, especially when we do. I mean, it all comes back to that pressure that we put on ourselves, right? To do the right thing and to be the good parent. And I use those words very, very ironically. So are there certain questions that we as parents can ask ourselves as we help our kids navigate these decisions of like how to know when the benefit outweighs the cost in either direction of where we go?
Well, so one of the things I really like to do is actually like, what are the benefits and the costs, right? So let's look at what the benefits and the costs are. And I like to look at what are the benefits and the costs of continuing, and what are the benefits and the costs of not continuing? And what might I be leaving room for if I take a detour? I think, there's the high level question, like, is this helping or is this hurting? Is this uncomfortable or is it like unbearable?
Yeah. Like and that's a really, I want to just jump on that of like, when do we know, what signs can we see that perhaps the decision is detrimental?
Well, I think you can see the level of distress that your kid is experiencing. And I think the level of energy that it is requiring of you. right? Like when it, our criteria as psychologists in making diagnoses is always sort of like the degree to which it's interfering. And so I think the degree to which it's interfering, in your day, in your child's well-being, in your relationship was another thing that I really feel strongly about, is that any one decision that we make as parents, especially as our kids are getting older, we have to remember that what we are also doing is building a relationship with our kids. And so, back to your, like, when you said, is this the hill I want to die on? Like, is this the stake that you want to claim in your relationship with your kid?
Yeah.
I think that's a good one.
It wasn't. It wasn't.
And that's okay.
I feel so empowered that I made the right decision for me right back then. So,
but you know what, Leslie, also, like, and I just got finished with a session with a teenager, and we were talking about something that was really hard for her. And she actually, she wanted to stop. She didn't like that, she wanted to stop. And a few weeks later, she can see that she stuck with it. And it ended up working in her favor. Right. And so I think, like, we have to, and you have this gift of, like, hindsight that, this was this really difficult moment with you and with your daughter and your family, and you did the best you could. And you know what? It worked out. Because I think so often we're so afraid, and we kind of get narrowed into thinking about all the possible negative consequences. But we have to step back and say, you know what? It's going to be okay.
I think that's a better family motto than "we don't quit. It's all going to be okay." Right? It's all going to work out. And it does. I think when we are in it, we sometimes forget that this whole parenting thing, it is a marathon. It is not a sprint. And with each mile and each stride, there's new opportunities and new roads that we can go on.
Absolutely.
I love my detour language now. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Dr. Emily, as we wrap up the show, tell me any final words of wisdom or advice you would give a mom of a tween or a teen that's navigating this of, when do I detour?
Yeah. Well, I think we've hit on the big ones, right? Is that sort of like trying to figure out when it's about you, when it's not about you, trying to make space for really just thinking about what's going on and why you're in this place. Noticing how fear is creeping in and all of the pressures that we put not only on ourselves, but on our kids, right? I mean, we have to remember our kids are facing so much stress and pressure, and we really want to be on their side with that. We really, like, especially for our older teens, like, we really want to be their cheerleader and their support. And I think anything we can do to not polarize the conversation, but to make it more about how do we figure this out together, I think that will benefit all of us.
Yeah, I love that. And I love what you offered too, of like the creativity and wisdom and outside the box thinking that can come, and not just from our teens, because absolutely they're incredible. But, this is where I'm going to cry. But a well-supported teen that has their parents saying, and I'm right here to help you figure it out together. Let's strategize together. It's a beautiful thing. Yeah.
And I'll add one more thing, which is, I think that's all saying, like, you matter to me, right? And I want to matter to you. And like, we can figure this out, because life is hard.
Humaning is hard. So is parenting. So is teening. So we're all in it together.
It sure is.
Oh, Dr. Emily, thank you so much for your wisdom. Please tell my lovely listeners where they can find you.
Where you can find me. Well, I have a website. It is dremilygordon.com, and I have a new Instagram page that I am trying to deal with. It is Dr. Emily Gordon. I have a complicated relationship with social media as a therapist, but I have a link. Sorry, I do have LinkedIn, but I have an Instagram page and a website.
Fantastic.
Well,
Dr. Emily,
so lovely.
Thank
to talk
you,
to you, Leslie.
Oh, mutual. Thank you, my friends. Why didn't they tell us that language matters? And when we say things like, let my kid quit, or hold on to beliefs that give us only one road to go on, we are limiting ourselves and ultimately limiting the relationship that we have with our kids, our tweens, and our teens. Why didn't they tell us that there is no wrong decision? There is only the right decision for you, as Dr. Emily said, right now. My friends, I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did. It was a gift, and I thank you for being part of it. Till next time.
Love what you hear? Well, I'd love to hear from you. You can find me at confidencecoachforgirls.com. That's confidencecoachforgirls.com. Or email me at lesliethelifecoach@gmail.com. That's lesliethelifecoach@gmail.com. Hope to hear from you.